So, believe it or not, I'm going to start with the left-hand side. May not be too unbelievable. And then, since this has sines and cosines in it, I'm going to start off and just change this to have sines and cosines. So replace tangent with sine over cosine. So we've got 1 minus sine of x over cosine of x, and 1 plus sine of x over cosine of x. And this doesn't have any compound fractions like this one does, so that's the next thing, is clear these compound fractions by multiplying through by a cosine of x on the top and the denominator. So this would distribute over to the 1, and it would be cosine of x. It would also distribute over here and cancel this cosine of x, leaving only that. And then distribute this, so it's going to be a cosine times 1. So it's going to be the same thing except with plus in between. And for the denominator, so sometimes what you've got to do is just take a break and see where it is that you're trying to get to and compare that to where you are. So I'm trying to get to the denominator being cosine of 2x. Well, there are 3 identities for cosine of 2x, and one of them looks similar to these, namely cosine of 2x is equal to cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x. So I'm trying to get the denominator to look like that. Well, if I multiply the denominator by its conjugate, which means use the same thing, cosine of x and sine of x, but instead use the opposite sign, then I would get cosine times cosine, that's the cosine squared. The middle terms would cancel out, and then the last term would be sine times negative sine, which would be the negative sine squared. So that works for the denominator. But whatever you do to the denominator, you need to also multiply the numerator by the same thing. So the denominator, I've already multiplied that out. It's going to be cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x. And then for this one, we need to multiply it out. So it's going to be cosine squared from the first one times the first one. In here, the middle terms are not going to cancel because it's going to be a negative sine times cosine, and this one's going to be a negative sine times cosine, so there's actually 2 of them that are negative sine of x times cosine of x. And then a little bell just went off in my head saying, hey, wait a second, that's the identity for sine of 2x. So with sine of 2x, there's only one identity, namely 2 sine of x times cosine of x. So you need to know these identities well enough that when things like that show up, your brain automatically says, hey, good news, that's what we were trying to get. Back to multiplying this out, I've got the last one times the last one, which is a negative times a negative. Sine times sine is going to be sine squared. And then I think we have all of the pieces we need. The denominator is exactly like it's supposed to be. That's cosine of 2x. And then we've got a cosine squared plus a sine squared equals 1. And then this identity right here, like I said, 2 sine of x times cosine of x is identical to sine of 2x. And there are all the pieces. That was a fun one. Maybe it deserves double smiley faces.